Why were you asked back to do further work on the series?
There was obviously rethinking went on after the original intention was just to spend a month, the month of September in Portmeirion, and everything, all the exteriors in Portmeirion would have been shot by then. But there were changes in the scripts for various reasons. And one result was, while I originally was only supposed to spend September filming it, I got a call after I was back home about a fortnight, could I come back to MGM, that because of this reshooting they needed a second unit in the studio. And in fact they rebuilt quite a sizable chunk of Portmeirion in the studio. This was largely the area around number 6's place. And there was it was a very big chunk of Portmeirion built on stage 7, I think. We're using stages 6 and 7. 6 had the interior of the octagon of the dome, and stage 7 had this large chunk of Portmeirion. And we were reshooting a fair amount of the stuff that had already been shot in Portmeirion. And this continued until the following March, when we went back to Portmeirion then to do additional stuff down there. When Checkmate had been edited, they found they were 7 minutes short. And Patrick Magoon wrote something which had the minimum of dialogue and the maximum of tracking around and everything else. It was done, there was the interior of his house was in the studio, and this started off with a shot of him in the bathroom, and he hears something outside and he looks around, and we pull back, and the camera was on a crabbing dolly, which was a fairly new item then. The older type of dolly had to run on tracks. You had to lay down planks, lay the tracks, which were quite heavy, on top of this, and so on. It would only run in a straight line. You could pan, and there was a jib on it which would also move through 360 degrees, but by and large the dolly had to run on a straight line, so you had to line it up in that way. Now with the crabbing dolly, you laid down blockboard or else had a smooth floor, and it could travel in all directions. So we had a crabbing dolly on this, and we tracked and zoomed and God knows what all around for 7 minutes. But we went all around Magoon's house, and we did almost a 360-degree track around the place. This caused quite a few problems, both for the lighting and for the sound. First of all, the lighting, because of the size of the shot, we had to put in a section of a ceiling at one point, which meant I couldn't light that area, and we had to rig a special light on the front of the camera to get some light in. To control this, I had to be near it. The camera operator and the focus puller could actually ride on the dolly. The rest of us couldn't. And going around, of course, we created a fair amount of noise, so much so that the sound recordist, when we did our first rehearsal, and everyone said, well, how was it? The sound recorder said, well, fine, except that I've heard of elephants tramping around the jungle here. So we all had to take our shoes off and run around in our stocking feet. And eventually we got our 7 minutes up in that, but it was purely padding. There's nothing in it. Rosalie Crutchley asks Magoon if he'd like a cup of coffee or something, and there's a kind of slight interplay, but it's more movement and looks than dialogue, and really it has nothing to do with the episode, it's just sheer padding.
Do you remember the return shoot at Portmeirion?
I think we were there for about a fortnight, and he was up for about 2 weekends. So far as I remember, it was David Tomlin did most of the direction of the additional material there, because by that time he'd become very much involved in the whole, well, he was involved very much from the beginning, but much more so by then, because he'd written a number of scripts and had actually directed one of them back in the studio, which had very little of Portmeirion in it.
Do you remember filming the exteriors for Many Happy Returns?
I was down in Folkestone and Dover. We were down there for a week in November, December of '66. And this was picking up various shots, mainly concerned with the one where Patrick escapes in a boat and ends up in the White Cliffs of Dover, and the shots of the getting on the lorry and seeing the police checkpoint, which caused some trouble at the time. We were set up with the police checkpoint and filming it when a real police vehicle arrived on the scene, and they were very unhappy and very displeased, and there were threats of banning us completely from the place. But someone talked very nicely to them, and I think it was Bernie Williams, and convinced them that it was a genuine oversight. We weren't trying to do anything on them.